It's day 357 off the grid, and I thought I would get around to showing you the big old tractor battery and how that's going. Well, it's been sitting off charge now for about 2 days, so I thought it's about time I do a load test and determine how good it's going to be for me to use for this or that, depending on the outcome of this test. So my typical load test is this 50 watt 12 volt halogen dichromic bulb, which is threatening to start a small grass fire there. Connected to the battery, and I'll set an alarm for an hour, so I'll run this for an hour and I'll come back and measure the terminal voltage at the end. It's probably been running now for nearly 10 minutes, so let's see if I can just get a meter on it. Oops. These things never go on when you want them to. Right. Without using hands. Well, there we go. 11.65 after running about a 5 amp load for nearly 10 minutes. Now, that's not too bad for a starter battery, because they do tend to sag quite heavily under load because of the thin plates. They can deliver a huge current for a really short period, but even a relatively modest sustained load like this, the voltage does fall quite rapidly. However, I'd expect a starter battery of probably half this size to achieve that. So, I mean, this one's clearly quite old. But it's what it does at the end of the hour is going to be the telling thing for me of what I want to do with this. I mean, I could go on and on and on like I've done with some batteries and test it for another hour and tabulate all the results and sort of just about get a feel for the actual amp hour capacity of such a battery, but I'll probably just do it for 1 hour and that'll give me a rough guide to the suitability, so we'll come back then and see what it's doing. Well, it's been about 20 minutes and I think I'm going to stop the test early because look, the voltage has fallen to 9.6 volts and it is still dropping. So it would seem that there's not much capacity left in this battery, but a few cycles of charging and recharging may improve that, or even just letting it sort of stay on charge for a while on a decent high voltage could help things, but I'm definitely not considering it as a serious battery for an important part of my system. But you know, as long as it can hold a 12 volts, you know, and it doesn't drop and it doesn't have any dead cells, it could be useful for something, but no, not a serious main role for the big old tractor battery. But I'll stop this now and I'll leave it for a couple of hours and then see where the voltage is sitting at. Well, while we're on the battery testing buzz, I thought I might as well do a few more today. So I really want to shift all these batteries around that are in my shed and sort of get them towards some useful situations. So what we have here now is a genuine deep cycle battery. It actually says deep cycle on there. It's made by the same company as the big old tractor battery, Century, and this is a 85 amp hour battery. I bought it second hand off a guy in Ashurst probably about a year ago. I've kept it topped up, but it doesn't seem to hold its charge very well. Like it'll sink down to about 12.4 if you let it, and that's what it was at when I first put these clips on. And this has just been starting to run, and as you can see, the voltage is now dropped to 12 volts, but we'll give it an hour and see how this goes, and then we can see how it compares to the big old tractor battery, which incidentally, its voltage was raising very quickly after I removed the load. It was back up to 11.8 within a minute, so I suspect what the problem with that is some fairly heavy sulfation, which is causing it not to perform very well under load, but it seems it might still be holding some power in there, so a bit of desulfating should work wonders on it. And I'm not talking about one of these bollocky little gizmos. I'm talking about hooking it up to a charging circuit that will allow its voltage to raise to 15 volts, because that seems to be a real way to actually desulfate a battery. These pulses don't seem to do a hell of a lot. But we'll see how this one goes. I mean, it's a genuine deep cycle. It's designed to run a load like this. This is a good size load for such a battery, and yeah. Oh, I made a little bit of a faux pas in the garden shed with the new little mini light system in there. I must have left the light on at some point, because when I got in there, Julian's charge controller was flashing low battery, low battery, low battery, and the light was still on. And I measured the voltage and it was down to about 6 volts. Now, I realised there was one fortunate thing about the LED light I installed in there, because it's resistor fed. Of course, as the voltage of the battery falls off, the current drawn by the LED bulb falls off, which is kind of nice, because if it was a switch mode fed LED light or lamp, it would have just started trying to draw more and more current by virtue of fatter on pulses as the voltage falls, and it would have killed the battery even quicker. So there is some advantage in a resistive fed LED bulb in that situation, though I should perhaps really have some sort of low voltage disconnect. So there we have it. We'll let this one go and see what goes on. It's just gone 1 hour on the Century deep cycle battery, and as you can see, the light is still bright. But what about the voltage? It's at 12.1. Interestingly, it has gone up slightly since when I started it. Yeah, it went up to about 12.14 something within about half an hour of starting the test, and it's stayed there rock solid ever since for the remainder. So I think we can conclude this is a damn good battery. And so it should be, because the guy that originally owned it reckoned he didn't use it much, so it's got a lot of life left in it. It has been sitting around a bit before he sold it, so that would account for the sort of not holding a good terminal voltage to begin with. But I think a bit of use of this one and she'll come up to full power. So there we go. I know I've got a very good battery on my hands there, and we can now terminate this test before these wires dodgily touch together, I'd say. Okay, just for fun now, here's another battery, and this is also a genuine deep cycle, but this one's very old. It's also a Century, as you can see. Hey, this is Century Battery Day. Well, this one is the first deep cycle battery, true deep cycle battery, that I ever owned, and it came with the house truck that I purchased in 2003, which I still have, but it's not on the road. And this battery was hardly new when I got the truck, so, you know, it's nearly 2016, so this is probably about 15 years at least old. It's holding a 12.2 volts on the terminals with no load. Yeah, it doesn't hold its voltage up very well nowadays, but let's put on the bulb and see what happens. Oh, bulb's nice and bright, but look, voltage 10.5 almost straight away. Now that's bound to be sulfation issues, but we'll keep it running for a while and see how well it actually performs. I'm not going to necessarily go for a whole hour on this one. I'll keep an eye on it and come back, but it is lighting the bulb quite brightly. Bear in mind that a bulb being a positive coefficient resistor, if the terminal voltage is a bit lower, its resistance will be a bit lower too, so it'll still try, it will never achieve it, but it'll try and aim for the same wattage even if the voltage input is a bit lower. There we go, so we'll let that go for a while and see what happens. Well, we're just coming up to 15 minutes, and as you can see, the voltage has sunk down quite dangerously low, just under 8.5 volts, so it's time to terminate this test. Again, I think that fall off is largely due to sulfation, although the battery doesn't have any bulging sides or anything like that, so it's not the kind of sulfation that's kind of destroyed the battery by shorting out plates and stuff, but it's certainly hampering the performance of it. So, yeah, I think we'll terminate this test now It may be able to be improved, who knows. But at least now I know a few things, and I might try a few things. Well, I thought it made absolute sense to test the Crown 130 amp hour deep cycle that I have been working on with the new Morningstar circuit. I mean, it's only fair, isn't it? Now, this one had a distinct advantage over the other batteries in that it has been charging right up until the moment that I've started this test. And it was sitting without any charge current at 13.1. You know, I hadn't disconnected it very long. But it's been running about a minute now, and as you can see, the voltage is starting to slip away there. We're at 12.5. So, we'll be able to see what's going on. I've pretty much made a decision now about what I'm going to do with these batteries. I'm looking at the Good Century deep cycle battery, the 80 amp hour one. I think I'm going to bring it in here and pair it up with the Crown, because, I mean, have a look. I don't have much space left in here, and I can't really fill up the space with batteries that are performing like batteries that are of a much smaller capacity. The size counts in here. A battery's got to be performing well to be living in this rather cramped space. So yeah, I think I'm going to put the Good Century deep cycle in here as part of this circuit. I have been umming and ahhing whether to put it out in the garden shed, but no, it's coming in here. And what else we put in here, I'm not sure yet, but that's a good start anyway, and that'll make a sufficient system that's big enough to, I think, function as night batteries. So we'll take it from there and see how we go. 12.1 now, but you know, they do that. Floodeds, of course, sag a lot more than AGMs. AGMs are the best for holding the terminal voltage under load, I've found, but it doesn't really matter if they sag as long as they don't go stupidly low and bounce back up when the load comes off. That's all that really matters there. So as you can see, I'll be making these tests with this 50 watt halogen bulb. It's a pretty good empirical test, you know. It's not too scientific, it's not too thorough, but it certainly gives a pretty fair comparison between this battery and that, you know. You know, when the battery was last charged is going to affect the results a little bit, but not too much. You can still, basically you can rank the batteries that you're considering. So, you know, there we go. So we'll come back in an hour and see how this one's going, and I'm sure this one will definitely last the course of an hour, although what the final voltage is anyone's guess, but it's still slipping towards 12 now. It's been well over an hour now, because after I set this going, I went and mucked around with the big old tractor battery and put it in its final resting place, and after that I was so damn hot I went inside to cool down for a while this was happening, and I decided to watch a video in the cool. But I also chose to watch an Antarctica video because I was hoping it would psychologically cool me down a bit too, and I think it did, but just this couple of minutes back out here it's all getting hot again. So yeah, this battery's been running now for an hour and a quarter, so I suppose that's a fair handicap to make up for the fact that this battery just came off charge before it was tested. And look, it's still at 12.032, so that's really good. I think it's about time to terminate this test now. Probably charge it up again, but yeah, that's pretty good. We'll pull off the lamp. I'll do it down here so I can leave the meter on, and we can see what happens as I drop the load. Naturally, as you'd expect, it's going to pick up. I'm not going to hold this here until it finishes doing that, but it looks like it's picking up again quite nicely. So I'm pretty pleased with this battery, especially considering when I first got it, a blooming earwig fell in one of the cells while I was cleaning out the debris around the cell holes, which really annoyed me, but hasn't seemed to have killed the performance of this battery. I was hoping its life force kind of got absorbed into the battery. So, yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead now and sort out the system a bit more. Still climbing. So, that's a good battery. Now we've got an Endurant starter battery. So, yeah, it's a change from Century, but mind you, we had the Crown. I was umming and ahhing about filming yet another battery test, but I thought it might be interesting to all yous out there that are interested in batteries, the difference in performance between starter batteries and deep cycle batteries at various stages in their life. This one, like the one next to it, are second-hand ones I got from the garage that have been removed from cars because they've obviously failed to have a good starting performance and the mechanics replaced them, so that's where I get them from. And you know, that's a mixed bag. Some of them prove to be really good and some of them prove to be absolute turds. So, and my intention here is, if I don't end up putting this battery out in the garden shed on the little 10 watt garden shed light system, I'll probably put this one or that one of these. So I thought I might as well put them through their paces and see which one's the best. So we've got the Endurant on first. It's been on for well over a minute now, probably nearly 2 minutes, and it was reading about 12.5 when I measured it open circuit. It's dropped down to 12.0 with the load on, and it's kind of staying there, so that's pretty decent so far. We'll see what it's like in an hour. Alright, just over an hour has passed and the Endurant is actually doing pretty well. 11.9 for a second-hand starter battery. Now I notice it's called, I don't know if I can film that, it's called an Endurant Loadmaster, which is definitely a starter battery, but it's intended for a vehicle with obviously fairly heavy electrical loads, so it'll have a really good reserve capacity built into it, which is probably accounts for the reasonably decent performance here. Didn't do quite as well as the Century genuine deep cycle battery, because that was still at 12.1, and there is actually a big difference between 11.9 and 12.1. If I ran this test for another hour on each of those batteries, I think you'd find quite a different result at the end, but nevertheless, quite a healthy battery. So I think it's time to do the next battery. And finally, this will be the final battery for today, because I'm actually running out of memory on my phone. But this is a Century starter battery. It's a 700 cold cranking amp battery. It doesn't seem to have any reserve capacity or anything noted on it, which is fairly typical of Century batteries when they're automotive starter batteries. It's a maintenance free design, so that kind of does limit the usefulness in a way on solar power, because one almost has to treat it like an AGM because you can't top it up. So no real hard out 15 volt charging sessions really on these, which is a bit of a pity. But then Julian's PWM5 controller would be ideal for running this, because it never puts the battery to that sort of extreme voltage. So if this one works out, it could be a good choice for the garden shed. Certainly that battery down there is probably the last battery I'm going to get to bother checking, so we'll see how that goes. So a couple of minutes into the test and we're down to 12.1 on this one. I'll let it run in for an hour, and at the end of this hour I will have a decision on which battery I'm going to put in the garden shed in place of the little one that's down there. The hour is up on the final battery I'm going to test of the day, and today's, well, sort of later or early evening now, and the sun's sort of starting to come down. Look at the light on the door there. Yep, And this battery is not as good as the blue one, that is for sure. It's fallen to 9.9 volts after the hour, which is still reasonably okay. I mean, it's still, a battery like this has still got some uses for what I'm doing. And I'm sort of contemplating whether in fact I might actually throw this one in the back shed, but I don't know. Because I'm planning on having a few more loads in there than I originally intended. Some lights around the barbecue area out the back there and stuff like that. So the idea is it'll only be a small solar panel, but we won't be drawing a lot of power off it that often, but there might be times when we draw a bit more power than that solar panel could supply in a day, so maybe a good battery. So yeah, I think I'll put the Endurant out in the shed. I might not actually do that today. Might get it ready, but we'll see how it goes. I don't think I'll do it today, and I won't be filming it today if I do, because this is the end of this video, and this is day 357 off the grid. Wow, that's another 8 days and it'll be a full year off the grid. Wow. Now, of course, is a really good time of year to be getting things ready for winter, because at the moment, of course, we've got so much excess electricity. It's almost like having the grid, in the sense that I can use power just to charge up other batteries using normal battery chargers and stuff off the mains, as it were, you know. Of course, that's off an inverter. Whereas once it hits autumn and stuff, the power becomes a bit more precious, and you know, you've got less scope to do this kind of thing. So kind of want to put everything in place now. I guess it's making hay while the sun shines. Although I'm not in a haste to erect more solar panels and stuff at the moment, because it's just too damn hot, eh? And that'll be more of a late summer, sort of early autumn thing to do, to get ready for the coming winter, of course. Since, of course, the summer solstice designates halfway through the astronomical year. Well, for you in the northern hemisphere, of course, your astronomical year is pretty much in line with your calendar year, but for us it's not, so that's a bit of a head fuck. But anyway, this is doing alright. Yeah, it's holding its own there. And that's a day of battery testing. Hope it wasn't too boring. It can be boring. Batteries are boring sometimes, aren't they? But they're very important, of course. I mean, they're the heart of your system, the guts of your system, really. You know, if you problems with your batteries, you've got problems with your system. So it's good to keep them behaved. And I think I'll leave it right about there.